Welcome to the Mount Holly Historical Research Library. This was donated in memory of Edward J. Ryan, who was a U.S. Navy retired, and it's dedicated to all who proudly call Mount Holly home. It doesn't look like a great big research library, but we do have some really neat books up here. We have some books on the Civil War, and some over here are World War II, and anybody that likes to research that. Sometimes we have school kids that come in that want to do a project. We have some extra books in here that are from about the county, Gaston County, that we are a part of, and so those are good. Over in this section, we have a lot of books on our textile mill village history that really got the town of Mount Holly booming whenever it got started. We do have some North Carolina reference materials that would have, some information on our city. There are some little booklets here. The history of Gaston County and from North Carolina, and it's compiled from some historical writings, and there's a lot of information in there. We have a couple CDs, just a few of them. We have Mount Holly Sports Banquet, the Hall of Fame banquet, and we have photos of some of those. This is the oldest one that I saw in 2007. There are several of those up here. And of course, some extra books, even on surrounding areas in Gaston County. I wanted to share this photo. This is a picture of a memorial in honor of Jack Warren, J.P. Warren, in honor of those who served. It was in Mount Holly. I think they said it was Central Avenue. And it has listed a lot of veterans there. Actually, I think I can see my dad's name on there. But it was told to me that somebody might still have this. And if you are somebody that knows the location of this, we would love to have the actual memorial in our museum. I pulled out a few things here. A lot of times, like I mentioned before, the kids will come down and do projects. This was Michael Nixon's Mount Holly Middle School that came down just recently. It's their history club that they have. I'm told that he's no longer teaching there, which is sad. But anyway, they did a project where they took the storefronts and then they looked them all up, and there might be a little snippet of something on the back that they wrote. This one that I had open was our actual building here, the Mount Holly Historical Society building, what used to be our city hall. And on the back, he had a few things about it, that it was built from 1922 to 1929. It had tilted ventilation. I don't know what that is, but that will be interesting. It said it used to be blocked up with stone bricks. I didn't know that. The midsection had been changed lots of times. And actually they added a concrete and brick handicap ramp to the building, and it's out front. So research and get information and learn about our history at the same time. This is another project, a North Carolina history project from 1978. Cecilia Marie Clemmer did on the Mount Holly Cotton Mill, which is, that mill building is still standing today. And she has pictures. I thought it was really cool what it looked like. And then actually a map where it is. It's on this little Alsace Avenue down on the other end of town. This mill, well, it turned into the Alsace mill. But she has, and you can tell it's hand typed by a typewriter. And she has all that history in there. It's pretty long too. Has articles and other pictures in the back. The famous A.P. Ryan that was instrumental in building the cotton mill and making it happen. So yes, people can come and do projects. This is another little interesting book that I found. It's Gaston County Marriages from 1889 to 1895. Now there's just a few pictures in here, but mostly it's just documentation of who got married to who, back in that period of time. There's one that might have a little picture, and this is all typed up. In the back, because I noticed it didn't seem to be in any kind of alphabetical order, but there is an index in the back, which will be helpful to find and it is an alphabetical order by person, so you can look and find and see who's there. I thought that was cool. I think it even had some of the marriage certificates or license or whatever it was they did back then. Let's see if I can find some. Well, it's in the back, right here, with the Register of Deeds in Gaston County back in those days. Look how some of them were handwritten. Today or later on, they would be typed in, done on a computer and all that good stuff. So I thought that was an interesting find in here. This is a book that I was going to share. It is about the architectural heritage of Gaston County. And of course it's by city. So Mount Holly has a section. And it has some very interesting homes in this book. It also goes into some of the meals. It tells each home who owned it. It's got some of their meal homes, meal village homes. Here's the Augusta Ryan Cannon House. That's really neat. All the architecture there. The Dellinger Nance home. Some of our churches are in here. First Baptist Church. The William O. Gardner home. And the Ramesses Hunter house. It was way back in the day. The C.E. Hutchinson home. He was one of our founders in the mill history. Willis F. Holland home. Worked in the old Holland Drug Store. So there's really a lot of stuff in here. And not just in, in Mount Holly, but in all the surrounding towns. Here's the old Mount Holly High School back in the day. So I thought that was really interesting book. Now, this book is all about the flood of 1916, which everybody talks about because it was so devastating back in the day. The floodwaters came from western North Carolina, where the mountain areas are, so by the time it got to us, it was very devastating. It took out our big old Mountain Island mill, the bridges at the Catawba River, and this book is very interesting in that it puts out the communities, all the little red dots that were affected by the 1916 flood. It gives the history of it from not just our area, but in all of North Carolina. There's actually some really great pictures, a pictorial part of it, where pictures were made. Like this one was from Black Mountain. And let's see. It just gives a good pictorial history of what it looked like when it happened. And, you know, the Mount Holly, we were very, you know, just proud of how our Mount Holly came back from all of that. We even celebrated, this little paper was in the book here, and it was all about on the 100th anniversary in 2016, when we had just remembering how well our city came back from the devastation of this flood. And there's some pictures, and these pictures were donated from our museum. So that was cool. That's always a top subject. My grandmother used to ask me if I remembered the 1916 flood, and I just hated to say that I was not even born during that time. So, Grandma, I don't know. But I've heard lots about it. This is an early picture of downtown Mount Holly. I'm not sure about the time, but looks to me like about the 50s and 60s era, because I could see the Gaston Theater there, one that I attended when I was a child. So I thought that was a nice picture to show. But I think our greatest resource in this whole library is the donation of the Mount Holly newspapers from 1945 to 2004, whenever Mount Holly News closed. I wanted to share a little bit of what's in it, and the oldest one I pulled out. So you can see how yellow it is, how fragile the pages are, and we really have probably the most history of Mount Holly in these pages, because it was written by the citizens that lived here during that time. And in 1940s, of course, the early 1940s, we were in wartime. So if you look at the pages, this is in February of 1945, you'll see a lot of history of the veterans, what they were doing that day, and the town whenever they were raising money for the war effort. Paper pickup here next Sunday by the American Legion. That was to go to the war veterans. I thought it was this article, all veterans of great wars are urged to join. And as we flip through just a little bit, we'll see some of the things that happened back then. The ads are really cute. This was River Valley Chevrolet back in the day. Also during that time, the March of Dimes was big because they were wanting people to give generously because of infantile paralysis, which is polio today. And we know today, because of vaccines, polio was not a thing. But this is an ad that the American Yarn and Processing Company put out for that. Let's see. Turn over. This is the woman's section. Mount Holly Women was a famous person that wrote this article. She did it anonymously, but I will share with you in a few minutes who it was. Here's Paul Durr. That was a famous store to shop for clothes. We have a lot of church news, and actually somebody even put the Sunday school lesson in here. Here's another good store, the Quality Store, that was well known back then. And the news back then was just so family oriented. because if you had a birthday or you had a new baby born, it was in the news. Right here's some more with our boys in the service. That's a section where they're, updating some of our veterans. And look at the funny papers back then. The Lone Ranger's the only one in here that I see, but they've come a long ways too, especially the paper, even when it went to color later on. Our boys with the colors, another section on that. And this big ad, the whole page, let's back the Legion, join the Mount Holly Post. The wartime just kind of took over the paper. Let's see, we had two theaters back then, the Gaston Theater and the Holly Theater. And you can see the movies that they were playing. Nothing familiar to me. So here's the grocery store ad from the A&P. Look at those prices. Don't you wish we had some of those today? Westland Farms, healthy babies and pasteurized milk. Here, and this goes into the next month, but this to me is just the best history that you can have. It's written down. We know some of our history is told orally, and we do have in the museum some oral history that we have collected from citizens in the Mount Holly, just what they remember. There's also in the paper, I noticed that there's just a little tiny section of the colored news, but they had their part, but there was just not a lot of news from them back then. So I think we covered all of that. I just wanted to share this little bit. Remembrances of Mount Holly. This was Mary Dunn Warren. She was the author of the Miss Holly back in the day. And just a little bit about her. She was born in 1914 in Mount Holly. She attended Mount Holly High School. She was valedictorian of that class, and she also was a top female athlete. In her early 80s, she wrote letters over a 2-year period back in 1996 and through 98 of her memories of Mount Holly. She was a great historian, of course. She had an article in the paper, and she wrote that local interest too. In her book, there's very early history of Mount Holly, way back into the 1700s. There's about all our churches when the 1800s came. There's very interesting stories about the churches and how they got started. The social life in Mount Holly I thought was very interesting because back then in the 1800s they had dances, musicals, home talent plays, they had box suppers, and I believe the A.P. Ryan building back in the day was down on the corner on Main Street. He had his office there, but upstairs he had an auditorium, is what she called it. They had a stage, and they had a lot of dances and things up there. They also had the Mount Holly High School graduation classes up there, had their graduation there. Mount Holly, she talks about, had fairs and street dances, and they also had tilting tournaments back in the day. Back in the horse and buggy days, she talks about Mount Holly's first street light, and I think the research says that it was located on the corner down there in the middle of town. Just one, that one. But the early homes that were here, the people that lived here in Mount Holly back then, all about the schools. And she goes back 156 years and tells us about the post office, how our mail used to come from Charlotte by horse and buggy way back in the days before there were paved roads. And then when our railroad came through, then of course the mail was delivered by railroad. And I think it went all the way to Brevard Station, which is Stanley today, and then it was distributed, out. So that was really a neat thing too. The room that we're standing in is where our Mount Holly Historical Society has programs. We usually try to have monthly programs, and we try to pick something historical, and we've just had some great attendance for that. Also, the table up there is where we have our board meetings, and you can just see a few of our extra vintage clothing and things back there. So, this is a new find that we have acquired in the last year. Terry McManaway, who came and did a program for us, told us that there is a ton of history in our cemeteries. And he told us about a lot of the tombstones and what the markings meant. The greatest thing he did was the research on the Pine View Cemetery here in Mount Holly. This is a huge map of all the blocks, the plots, the lots, and the names of each of those people buried there. He also has located if they were veterans. You can see there's a Vietnam veteran here, World War II veteran. So that kind of history. He has left all of this donated to the library. It's 3 volumes here of the same stuff. It has 3 binders, the lots, the blocks, and the markers. He also gave us a thumb drive of all of this material, so we can hook it up in the computer and you can come in and look up your long lost relatives or whatever. This is the thumb drive files that are in there. And I think when you go on the thumb drive, you have more photos of some of the tombstones and stuff, like this one here. This is the plot section, because this book contains the A and B section. In the beginning, this is a list of all the names of everybody in the cemetery. It's in alphabetical order. It gives their location, which A, B, C plot or block that they're in, their date of birth, their date of death, and how old they are. So that goes on all the way in alphabetical order. Let's see. And this is how it starts out with the plotting. Let's see. This is Block A. It has everybody's name that's in Block A. And then it has the plot, just like that's on here, with everybody's name in it, so you can locate it. And then it goes back and shows us. And it still has the same information. Here's a Korea veteran, a Coast Guard. You find out a lot of stuff in cemeteries. And if you ever want to do or looking into your genealogy and you were born and raised in Mount Holly and look up where your relatives might be, this might be a good resource for you. The other 2 volumes are just the same, got the other blocks in those. So we're grateful that he donated that to us. And he did tell me that he was going to eventually do the city cemetery, that's what it's called, up there on the corner of Hawthorne and Catawba. That is one of the oldest cemeteries, and I'll really be interested to see who's buried there. And there's some really neat old tombstones. So he did do a lot of research on Find a Grave. You know, you can look up anything on there and find somebody's grave site. So that's pretty much our library here, and we hope that people will be able to come and use it.